Welcome to Inside Manufacturing. I'm Todd Bingham, President and CEO of the Utah Manufacturers Association. We're excited to have a special guest with us here today. Going to spend some time talking about a term or a word that feels like everybody during the pandemic became an expert on, and that was supply chain. Before the pandemic, none of our neighbors, anybody even knew what the term supply chain was, and now your neighbors seem to think they know everything about supply chain. We're pleased to have with us here today Clint Weston. Clint's the founder and CEO of VenConnect. Clint, thanks for being with us here today.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show on Inside Manufacturing. We talk about everything related to manufacturing and anything that might be impacting our manufacturing companies across the state. So look forward to the discussion today and talking more specifically about supply chains, getting a little bit into supply chain finance and some of the things that might be impacting our manufacturers today. So maybe just to kick it off, talk to us briefly about VenConnect, and you've come up with some innovative ways to look at cash flow and optimizing cash flow. So tell us about the company and where it comes from, a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. So my name's Clint Weston. As Todd mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of VenConnect. And we started the company. I spent about 25 years almost in commercial banking and really enjoyed working capital, working with small businesses, but always had that entrepreneurial kind of desire. And about 2.5, 3 years ago, came across supply chain finance and just fell in love with it because I saw the immediate impact that it can have with companies, with businesses, but more importantly on their vendors and suppliers. And so it was just a concept that immediately resonated with me and my commercial finance background. And so with that, we built a platform that offers supply chain finance to manufacturing companies. We're here in Utah. I'm born and raised from Utah. And so really excited to be part of the UMA and working with companies here in Utah. But really, supply chain finances we'll get into is a great tool to push liquidity down to vendors and suppliers, which, as you mentioned earlier, just is so critical.
Yeah.
And everybody's becoming an expert on supply chain.
Right. As we talk about that, I jokingly say that, but literally my neighbors had never heard the term supply chain until there was a toilet paper shortage.
Yeah.
And then everybody seemed to know what supply chain was, right? And we still continue to talk about that. I think the general person out there doesn't understand how complicated the supply chain is.
Right.
They really don't understand the length of time that it takes to rebound and to continue to fill that supply chain. What are the trends you're seeing out there in supply chain? What in your side of things? What are you seeing?
Yeah, fantastic question. So I think as you've mentioned, and this is so on topic, but the supply chain, not only for individuals with toilet paper shortages and now baby formula and all these other issues, but supply chain is really rising to the top for many companies right now, just kind of shot to the top. And it's a board level discussion, management discussion. And we know that supply chain and managing supply chain risk is one of the key risk factors of any company. But it really has become more and more of an important topic because of the challenges that are going on post-pandemic. And now we're, the inflation that we're looking at and some of the other challenges in the economy. And so certainly this topic rising to the forefront. Another interesting kind of outgrowth, maybe not interesting, but just what we're seeing is vendors and suppliers no longer and companies can no longer rely on just-in-time inventory practices.
Yeah.
They used to be able to just have that come in, but with the supply chain challenges, we've seen a difficulty with that, no question.
So I was going to ask you on that without interrupting you again. When we don't have a supply chain crisis, that just-in-time makes perfect sense, right? Less on hand product in warehousing, less requirement for warehousing and storage.
Right.
But as you indicated, with logistics being the way they are and supply chain being the way they are, it's really difficult to play that game. I mean, in a lot of ways, you're betting. You're seriously betting on the come as to, can I get that product when I need it and that type of thing. So what is an answer? What are the strategies companies are using to address that? Are they stockpiling more, holding more on hand, which is also potentially a dangerous game as well?
Right. Yeah. So you've hit the nail on the head, which is that a lot of vendors and suppliers and companies just in general, because they can't rely on just in time, they're using their liquidity to build up inventory and to hold on to supply, because what they need to do is provide for their customers. And so you're absolutely right that there's this kind of certainly not hoarding, but an accumulation of inventory and unfortunately, that becomes a really large use of a company's capital and cash flow so that they can have something to support their customer base, to continue to provide the products and services that they need to. So yeah, really building up inventory levels is kind of another key trend that we're seeing in supply chain. And then I would say the need to manage terms with your counterparties, that's becoming an even more critical factor. Whereas before, managing on 30-day terms seemed to be pretty just standard.
Right.
But really now the need to kind of balance the incoming cash flow with the outgoing cash to your vendors and suppliers is another one. And then I would say the last thing is really a need to optimize working cash flow or working capital and your cash flow. Because again, if companies are using their liquidity right now to hire employees, as we know, the labor shortage, and so the cost of labor is increased, and then the need to have additional inventory on hand. All of those things are eating up and using a company's liquidity. And so the need to optimize it and a shift toward fintech tools that can provide stakeholder benefits that maybe historically banks and other financial institutions have provided, but maybe not at the expeditious need that we have right now. And so, there's just been a whole host of things going on, and it's been impressive to see how companies have responded to it. But I think we can continue to do more to benefit companies.
I think it's one of those questions, as I indicated, a lot of folks, they know the term supply chain, but they don't really understand the domino effect or how intrinsically connected those companies are.
Yeah.
Right. If your XYZ company that is receiving goods and parts and component pieces from 6, 7, 8, 12 other manufacturers,
Yep.
that gets complicated in terms of what are their challenges with their supply chain and getting those pieces that then come to you that are a part of your finished good, or you're a cog in that gear, if you will. You've mentioned some good questions that an individual company can ask. Is there any mechanism that a company, and how do companies deal with asking those same questions of their partners in their
Yeah.
supply chain?
Yeah.
How do they go about that? If you and I work together and I'm purchasing product from you that comes in and then goes into my component part, how do I reach out and say, Clint, how's your supply chain?
Yeah.
Are you guys okay where you, because a lot of times the waiting is, and the logistics are they're just, as I indicated, it's the domino effect.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
If you have to wait
absolutely.
for one supplier, it's okay.
Yeah.
If all of a sudden you're waiting on 20
Right.
and their timelines are different,
Yeah.
it's a little bit nuts.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that with your other partners? And can you ask those questions?
Yeah, I certainly think, especially right now, it feels like one of the outgrowths of the pandemic is a greater patience level or acceptance that it's a
Right.
little bit. I get the general sense that we're all in this together, and
Things are not the norm right now.
right. And I understand you're having a challenge, and your challenge is going to impact my ability to provide tools or goods or services. And so I do feel like there's this kind of, we're all in this together. However, having said that, I think stepping back and asking those critical questions, particularly of those key vendors, that communication would be vital. And so we really recommend, there are kind of two questions that I think are important for any company to ask, which is, number one, what are the key suppliers that we have right now? And number two, could they benefit from liquidity and being able to make sure they've got the liquidity and the cash flow they need? Because again, this idea of supply chain finance is investing in your supply chain, which then only works its way back up to you, right? If that supplier or vendor can get products sooner, can hire the staff that they need to, it's just going to reinforce your ability to continue on up and provide your product to the supply chain.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think asking those two questions, who are our key vendors, and then which ones maybe potentially could use some liquidity through early payment discounts and vendor supplier payments would be great questions to ask.
So you alluded to that. We've kind of talked a little bit about it, but how does that supply chain finance, how does it more effectively help companies to, manage that financial risk? What specifically are
Yeah.
we talking about here?
Yeah, great. What I see with supply chain finance really is the first time I talk to a CFO or a CEO, in their minds, they're thinking, well, I'm not having cash flow problems, so I'm just fine. And my immediate response is, that's great, because that's not why we're here. We're actually here to help provide liquidity and cash flow to your vendors and suppliers. And so supply chain finance is really a working capital cash flow optimization tool that provides on-demand liquidity to your vendors and suppliers. So it gives them the ability to choose an early payment discount based on their particular cash flow circumstances. And so again, this is a tool that we can come into a company and say, here's a free cash flow tool that gives you the ability to offer early payments and that on-demand liquidity to your vendors and suppliers, but it doesn't impact your cash flow. You don't have to use your cash flow. The third party, that the funder, so VenConnect, can advance those payments on your behalf, and you get to keep your terms. What we really have seen with supply chain finance, just in general, and I think this is universal in good times or bad, but there's this cash flow tug of war, right? Where a customer wants to hang on to their cash
Yeah.
as long as possible, and a vendor wants to get it as quickly as possible. And so it's difficult. So if that vendor comes to their customer and says, hey, I'm in a cash pinch and I need to get paid early,
Yeah.
that customer then has a decision to make as, well, okay, they're a critical vendor, so we want to, accommodate that. But now that's going to eat up our liquidity. And again, that's where a tool like VenConnect, a supply chain finance tool, can come in and say, you don't have to use your cash flow. We'll advance it on your behalf. You can use our cash flow, and there's no cost to you. That the platform doesn't cost, the software doesn't cost. There's no cost to advance, because it's the vendor or supplier that's saying, yeah, I would like to get paid right now.
Right.
And then the last thing about supply chain finance is just, again, this ability to create immediate payment options to your vendor and supplier, because they don't have to take an early payment discount. They can say, no, this week I'm doing just great. And then next week they may say, okay, I got payroll coming up, or I got some expenses and I need to purchase some materials. And so, yeah, it'd be great if I can accelerate the payment on mine. And so, again, giving that complete flexibility and those payment options to vendors and suppliers is really where supply chain finance shines.
Okay. We've been talking to Clint Weston today with the CEO of VenConnect, and we're talking about supply chain finance programs, and kind of gotten into some of those details. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll come back and talk about it more in a few minutes. Welcome back to Inside Manufacturing. I'm Todd Bingham, President and CEO of the Utah Manufacturers Association. Remember, what Utah makes Utah. We're here today with Clint Weston with VenConnect, and been talking a little bit about supply chain finance, supply chain challenges, ways for manufacturers to look at some liquidity and other options within supply chain finance. So we talked a little bit about kind of what it does and how to effectively manage that financial risk. We talked a little bit about the side of third parties. So can a company implement this on their own without a third party, or by themselves? What are the challenges there?
Yeah. So I usually kind of go to a company and say, when they say, why don't I just offer the early payment discounts myself and take advantage of the discounts myself? I always ask them two questions. The first is do you have the cash flow and the liquidity to offer early payment discounts? And I think, generally speaking, most companies say, yeah, we've got cash flow. We're doing fine. Maybe we don't have a ton of excess liquidity, but we've got liquidity and cash flow. And the second question that I say, great, do you then have the time and the disposition to allow your vendors to call you up and say, hey, this week I want to take a discount on invoice 7 and 15 and 23.
Sure.
And then next week, I don't want to take an early payment discount on anything, but then the following week, I want it on everything. And I think so far, most companies will say, no, I don't have
Sure.
that time or disposition.
That's where the real work comes in.
That's
right?
exactly right. Yeah. And so my response to them is to say, yes, you can implement this. And if you answer yes to both of those questions, I've got the cash flow and I've got the time and the disposition to let my vendors flow in and out
Mhm.
and to pick and choose, then I'd say, yes, absolutely. You should offer this and take advantage of it.
Right.
But if you answer no to one or both of those questions, then a supply chain finance tool like VenConnect is ideal, because now you can say, hey, I can offer those early payment discounts. I can offer the liquidity, and I'm not being impacted.
Sure.
I'm not being burdened, and I'm
Right.
not having a customer, or rather a vendor or supplier, call me up and say, did you get my invoice? When am I going to get paid?
Sure.
So yeah, they can absolutely implement it themselves. But if they don't have that time and disposition to do that, or to negotiate with all of their individual vendors, then yeah, VenConnect's a great option.
Who tends to be the your sweet spot in terms of company size? Do you have a particular company? I mean, clearly, we talked a little bit off air. Our big companies tend to be able to handle this
Yep,
and address this. They're typically a little more sophisticated, have more staff,
Right.
have more folks in there that are dealing with invoicing and vendors, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Is there a company that you kind of look at from either an annual revenue standpoint or something like that really makes sense to be looking at supply chain finance and
Yeah.
some help?
Yeah. So what we do when we visit with companies is we're determining, we underwrite supply chain finance very similar to a working capital or a cash flow loan. So the company has to generally be in business for about 5 years. They've got to be profitable. And then generally we're saying companies that are doing between $1 million in gross annual revenue up to about 100 million, 125 million in gross annual revenue is our sweet spot. There are companies, the larger enterprise level companies, Fortune 500 and others, they've been doing this for years
Sure.
themselves.
Right.
But where we've really identified a need in the market is to say there's this small to medium size, businesses, these small to medium sized companies that could really benefit, because again, they're generally dealing with local, regional suppliers or vendors who are hungry for an early payment discount.
Sure.
We're seeing, between 35 and 40% of vendors and suppliers are saying, hey, I would take an early payment discount if one was offered to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so again, that gives them, or VenConnect gives them the ability to say, hey, we can offer you that option at no impact to your cash flow, no impact to you, no cost to you. So yeah, those companies that, of course, we love Utah. We're here in
Sure.
Utah,
Yeah.
and we're a member of the UMA. But manufacturing absolutely is one of our sweet spots that we love working with.
Right.
And again, for us, where we're passionate about small business, we really take it to heart about being able to offer liquidity to those vendors and suppliers that are small businesses themselves and can really benefit from a tool like this.
So lay it out for me again. Benefits, kind of just lay them out. Specific benefits that folks are going to get using this, so we can recap what we talked about in the first segment here.
Yeah. So some of the benefits, certainly it enhances the overall AP process. It even makes it more efficient, because again, instead of a customer or vendor calling you up and saying, did you get my invoice? When am I going to get paid? Our VenConnect platform and portal gives them complete transparency. It allows them to see when the invoice is going to be paid, allows them to pick and choose based on their cash flow circumstance when they want to. So that transparency and reduced AP burden is certainly one of the benefits. But what we see is the major benefit to this is the deepening of those relationships with vendors and suppliers. You can imagine if we've got a vendor or supplier and they're doing work for your company and they're doing work for my company, and they know that you can pay them immediately, your job's probably going to get pushed to the front of the line, right? You just solidified a best friend for life. And that's really what supply chain finance is ultimately doing, is solidifying and strengthening those relationships, again, by offering liquidity down the line. And then there are other benefits of being able to offer, turn your accounts payable department into a revenue generating department, because VenConnect offers a revenue share back to the company as they sign up. And so there's a whole host of just efficiencies and ability to generate revenue. But again, at the heart of it, what we're really trying to do is let the customer, let's say the manufacturing company, let them be the hero to their vendors and suppliers who are in need of cash flow, being able to say, here's a great free tool, And again, from an IT or an accounting standpoint, nothing to implement, nothing to integrate with, no cost, no subscription. So again, our tool is to say, hey, especially from manufacturing companies, this is a free tool and it gives your vendors and suppliers all the benefits in the world.
Great. Very helpful. So if somebody wants to, they've been looking at supply chain finance, they've watched this webinar with us. They've said, you know what, there's some options, some things I ought to be looking at. I really haven't known exactly where to go. How do they get in touch with you? How do they find more information? I'm assuming there's lots of options out there. We like to support those companies that support us. It's one of the reasons that we're here, as VenConnect is a member of UMA and has brought this information to us. So how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, great question. So of course, our website, myvenconnect.com. You can email me, Clint, at myvenconnect.com. You can also call us. You can call my cell phone. Love to answer and love to visit with anybody about this because I am so passionate about it. But my cell phone, 801-678-7895. And you can text me anything. We'd just love to sit down and visit. And again, where it's no cost, we kind of say to companies, hey, why wouldn't you offer this to your vendor or supplier? And so, visit us. You can connect with us on LinkedIn as well. So all the fun social media sites as well.
And we'll put some of that information on the webinar here so folks can see it as well. Yeah, between you talking supply chain finance at parties and me talking politics at parties, boy, just talk about the life of the party there.
That's right. Yeah.
But we appreciate you coming on and visiting with us. And again, supply chain is such a critical issue right now. I think most of us anticipated that by second quarter 2022, we'd start to have our arms around supply chain. And we've seen that for a variety of reasons is not the case. And it's going to take longer than we thought it was to fill those pipelines back up and get to the point where we're not dealing with supply chain issues, but we certainly are right now. And if you have a need out there and getting your arms around some supply chain finance and looking at how to manage your risk and do some of those things, how to get that liquidity and that money to flow to your vendors and down the row, Clint's certainly somebody you ought to reach out to and get some information. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Todd.
Inside Manufacturing.
So great. Thank you very much.
You bet. Again, thanks for our guest, Clint Weston with VenConnect, being here with us today. Thanks for supporting UMA. Remember, what Utah makes Utah, and keep making products out there. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.